You're listening to the micro version of the Savage Lovecast at savage.love.
If you're stuck in a relationship quandary, or if you're looking for sexual harmony, well, there's nothing you can't ask on the Savage Lovecast.
Teenagers and young adults, according to a new poll conducted by researchers at the University of California, teenagers and young adults are not going to like Rivals, the new TV series about rich and powerful business and media people doing their rich and powerful business and media people thing. For anyone who's missed watching rich assholes fly around in helicopters since Succession ended, Rivals fills that gap. It stars Alex Hassel, one of those straight guys women find hot, but gay men do not. Based on a poll of the gay men in the living room when I watched Rivals, 100% of them did not find Alex Hassel hot. Small sample size, just two of us, but data is data. Anyways, it stars Alex Hassel, who's an objectively hot guy, as a wealthy member of parliament, an aristo, and David Tennant as his Rupert Murdoch-esque nemesis, or his rival. The opening shot of Rivals, Season 1, Episode 1, close-up of a man's ass. And it is not a shot of an ass in repose. It is a shot of an ass at work. The camera pulls back to reveal Alex Hassel's character, Rupert, having sex with a woman on the Concorde in the bathroom. The Concorde was a supersonic jet that used to fly from London to New York and back in less than 3 hours. The Concorde taken out of service in 2003 after never making a profit and then suddenly starting to crash a lot. If that opening sequence doesn't chase off all the teenage viewers, at least the ones polled by UCLA, the montage at the end of the first episode, which featured every main character fucking at least one other main character, that should do the trick. It was almost too much for me, and I curate a porn festival twice a year. So, anyway, this new study out of UCLA, Teens and Screens, found that 63.5% of young people between the ages of 10 and 24, which is a pretty broad spread age-wise and includes people who are not teenagers, but 63.5% of the young people, more than 1,200 of them polled, wanted to see more platonic relationships on their screens and fewer romantic and sexual relationships. That's up from the 51.5% of young people who told researchers the same thing last year. My reaction? No one is forcing anyone to watch Saltburn against their will, unless you count Terry, who I made watch Saltburn with me against his will, and he's still pretty mad about it. And no one has to watch Rivals either, or the latest reboot of Cruel Intentions. As Brooke Barnes points out in the New York Times, there seems to be a disconnect between what young people tell researchers they want to watch and what young people are actually choosing to watch. The Sex Lives of College Girls is popular with young people, as is The Inane Emily in Paris. Tell Me Lies, a steamy soap about college kids, popular with young people, as is Heartstopper, an anti-steamy soap that doesn't have much sex in it or any sex until late in season 3, but does have an awful lot of making out in every episode. And then there's Sex Education and Euphoria, also popular with young people. Yalda T. Ulls, the founder for the Center for Scholars and Storytellers, which is based at UCLA and conducted this study, doesn't think kids are saying one thing to researchers, like her team, and then doing another. The problem, she argues, is the programming on offer is based on what adults think young people want and not what young people actually want. Hollywood storytellers, she argues, base their work on their own memories of their teenage years, back when teenagers were having a lot more sex. But I've been to Hollywood. I would argue that a lot of what makes it onto the screen is what Hollywood storytellers wish their teen years looked like. Back to Ulls, teenagers, she concludes, are watching a lot of the sexy shit on TV because they, quote, have no other choice. Don't they? They haven't changed the name of Antiques Roadshow to Antiques Load Show last time I checked, and I just checked. And if you can't watch the Golf Channel without thinking about Arnold Palmer's penis, that's a you problem, not a programming on the Golf Channel problem. Fact is, there's a lot of programming out there that doesn't touch on sex or center sex. Now, what I detect in this study is our old nemesis, the externalization of the internal conflict. If you find it hard to resist temptation, the temptations of internet porn or rent boy ass or the latest reboot of Cruel Intentions, it's hard not to resent the thing or the person that tempts you. be they cam girl or rent boy or faceless Hollywood executive. But I get it. I do get it. There's so much sexual content coming at us or available to us at all times from all directions on all our devices, and that shit can be hard to resist, and sometimes we wish there was less of it. Sex is a part of life. It's a part of the stories we tell about life. Friendship, platonic relationships, also a part of life. And those relationships, friendships, which are often more lasting and just as or more fulfilling even than our romantic relationships. Pick up and read The Other Significant Others, Raina Cohen's really terrific book about friendship. Maybe some Hollywood executives need to pick it up and option it. Friendships, those kinds of platonic relationships, they do get short shrift in the stories that get told in the movies and on TV. So maybe we need more buddy comedies for the boys and more movies and TV shows about women whose friends are their friends and not their rivals for the girls. Maybe a Kate and Allie reboot next, not another Cruel Intentions reboot. All right, coming up on the show today, tons of your Qs, lots of my As, and joining me on the Magnum, Ace Dad is here. That's Cody Daigle-Orians coming on the show to talk about their new book, The Ace and Arrow Relationship Guide, and we discuss micro-labels, whether straight identified asexuals are queer, and whether ace folks are obligated to disclose their asexuality when dating known or suspected allos, aka non-asexuals, or just, sexuals. That's on the Magnum. Also coming up for Magnum subs this Thursday, a new Sex and Politics. Tim Keck, co-founder of The Onion, my old boss at The Stranger, and host of the brand new podcast, Mush Love, joins me to talk about politics and mushrooms and do something I know Tim is good at, give a little sex advice. And hey, don't want to dwell on it because everybody knows it. Next Tuesday, Election Day, next week's show comes out on Election Day. I remember what Election Day 2000 was like, how stressful that day was. And I solemnly promise that we will not be talking about politics on next week's show at all. If you need a break next Tuesday, and you're going to need a break, remember the long wait for results, we're pulling together a freaky show to take your mind off things. We're going to keep it weird in a good way on next week's Lovecast. And you can help. If you have an extra weird or crazy sex or relationship question or problem or hypothetical, send it in by recording your question now on your phone and emailing it to us at q@savage.love or drop by savage.love, and you can record your question and upload it directly on our website. And finally, vote blue no matter who, from the top of the ticket, Harrod's Waltz, right to the bottom of your ballot. And remember, friends don't let friends vote for third-party grifters, because a vote for a third-party grifter candidate is a vote for Trump. All right, let's get to the calls. This episode is brought to you by Field, an app where curious people come to connect. Download Field on the App Store or Google Play and find out why so many of my listeners are already using it.
This episode of the Lovecast is brought to you by the good folks at Squarespace. They make it easy to build a beautiful website, blog, or online store. Head on over to squarespace.com/savage for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code SAVAGE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Hey, Dan and team, by Polyguy from Western Canada here. I've got a little bit of a situation. I live rurally and I have one home on my property, and I've been building a home next door by myself, and I've been getting work traders now and then. So I trade room and board in exchange for labor, and they live here and we share meals, and I bring them out to have fun and things. And I had this really great Italian guy for a few weeks who's been really helpful. He's got some carpentry skills, and him and my fiance, who I live with, have been developing some attraction for each other, which they brought to me, and I was encouraging of exploring, but they asked what I needed to feel safe around that. And I said, I just need you to take it slow because of the proximity. We share several meals a day together. He's working for me all the time. And because of needing to be in the space with them all the time, I asked that every time they escalate a little bit, they check in. So, flirt, check in with me, see how that's landing. Then why don't you guys make out and check in with me and see how my nervous system is doing so that I can stay safe and regulated amidst this new situation of all of a sudden potentially having a live-in partner here or live-in lover. Anyway, a couple of days ago when I was at work, instead of just making out, they hooked up, and I'm feeling really betrayed and disrespected and angry. And I'm wondering, Dan, if you get some advice about how to approach the situation and the conversation that I need to have. I've been burying myself in work. I've got a couple jobs and just hanging out with friends in the evening. So I haven't seen them both yet. Had a small conversation with my partner and just expressed how angry and hurt I was. And she was apologetic, but I still feel quite betrayed and unsafe. So how do I go about having this conversation? Part of me wants to support my partner who's had a hard time finding sexual attraction for other people. This guy seems unique and seems like there's really good chemistry, obviously. So I want to support her in that because she's newer to poly. She's just had a few hookups at festivals and things. But I also don't want to override my own needs and disrespect myself and be in a space where I'm with these two people who have expressed in a way that shows a lot of disrespect for me. So I feel a lack of trust there. So how can I have these conversations? What needs to happen? Should I just kick this guy out? Which I would not like to do because he's super helpful in my house and I've been overwhelmed with work. But I need to feel safe at home.
The rules that they agreed to, that you laid down for them, weren't observed. They owe you an apology. But what I hear you saying about wanting to encourage your girlfriend as she explores polyamory is that you would have given them permission to do what they did if they had continued to mother may I you to that point of asking you with every new development for your explicit permission. You would have granted them that permission. You were on your way there, and they got carried away as horny people who are allowed to make out often do, and wound up going all the way to that place that you probably would have let them go had they asked for your permission. And so what do you do now? Well, seems to me that you grant your retroactive position. You grant permission retroactively to cover what they did after a moment of making it clear to them that you were hurt and that the rules that everybody agreed to were broken. Then you need to zoom out and ask yourself, well, were the rules that everybody agreed to, or that you demanded everybody agree to, or asked everybody to agree to, were they reasonable rules? Rules that horny adults who are allowed to kiss and make out and touch each other could, under that particular making out and horny and pressed together kind of circumstance, honor. I'm not saying whether they should have honored them. They absolutely should have. They owe you an apology. It sounds like you've gotten an apology. And what do you want? Like, what's your bigger want? You wanted them to ask for your permission before they hooked up. They didn't. Is your bigger want, you want this guy to stick around and work on your house? You want your girlfriend to feel like she has the ability to hook up with other people, that she, when somebody comes along that she desires, that she can, with your support and permission, granted in advance, act on those desires? Okay, well, I think one of the ways you could demonstrate that to your girlfriend, that she could have asked you for your permission, is by giving her your permission, recognizing it was a party foul or an offense, not a betrayal, bringing it under the penumbra of the permissions that you had already sort of granted them as they were tiptoeing up to doing what you were going to tell them they could do in the first place. If only they'd asked and they didn't ask. Tell them it was okay. Tell them feelings were hurt. Let's not do this way in the future with this guy or anybody else, but it's okay. What happened? I'm not going to break up with you. I'm not going to send him away. I will eat this. I will get over it. It'll help me get over it if you guys apologize one or two more times, and then I'm advising you to drop it. And then if it happens again, if it becomes a pattern of behavior where your girlfriend telegraphs to you that a mother may I approach to fucking around or touching other people isn't going to work for her because she would rather ask for forgiveness than permission. If something about asking for permission is a problem for her, and it is for some people, asking for permission can feel like a libido killer or be de-eroticizing of the moment somehow. And so maybe you just give her blanket permission, like when she's feeling it, because she doesn't feel it very often, to go for it, because asking for permission, having to ask you for permission, is going to generate a lot of conflict in your relationship because she might get carried away. And this could become a pattern. And so I'm saying if it becomes a pattern, then it's a problem and you have to decide whether to exit this relationship or not. But if it becomes a pattern, it could also be an indication that how you're asking your girlfriend to manage desire and sex and eroticism doesn't work for your girlfriend. And if you want the girlfriend you've got, you may need to make an adjustment to how you're trying to manage outside sexual contact in your relationship. And it should be mutual agreement, of course, but the agreement you came to didn't work. They should apologize. You should forgive. Hopefully, fingers crossed, in the future she'll ask for permission. But again, if it becomes a pattern that she can't ask for permission, then she's got to go or this rule's got to go.
G'day Dan and crew, long-time listener and Magnum sub here, coming to you from a small Australian city. I'm in my mid-30s, a cis woman. I've been with my husband since we were in high school. While I would not recommend anyone try that at home, it's somehow worked out for us and we're a really solid team. Over the past couple of years, I've come to recognise that I'm bisexual and have spoken to my husband about wanting to explore this further. Apart from my first kiss in high school, I haven't been with a woman, and our relationship has been monogamous apart from a few threesomes with a male friend of ours a few years ago. Despite trying to be supportive, the idea of me seeing women on my own has been hard for my husband to get his head around. I haven't pushed it because his mental health has been pretty bad recently and I don't want to add more strain. And also, selfishly, I don't want to blow my chances of getting what I want by stuffing up the timing. So a couple of days ago, my husband brought up with me that he'd been thinking about this recently again and that he'd be okay with it. I was really surprised. I asked some follow-up questions. Were there any caveats, rules, boundaries he wanted to discuss? And apart from some general kind of courtesy and consideration things, there aren't. As an aside, we also had really beautiful, lovely, passionate sex that night because, surprise, surprise, that level of trust in me and security in our relationship is really fucking hot. So I guess the ball is in my court now to actually do something with that permission slip. And so, of course, now I'm scared and a bit lost. I've been with him for 20 years. I've literally never flirted with anyone. I've never really been hit on much, even though I'm outgoing and not terrible looking and I make friends easily. And I think that's because I've always just sort of shut down any attention from people before it even begins. I think I project an air of unavailability and I friend zone people immediately upon meeting them. I get along with people, I do heaps of fun things with others and by myself, but I don't know how to do those things with a mindset of seeking potential partners or demonstrate my availability without being a creep or a pest. But yeah, the real issue for me is figuring out sort of how to flirt respectfully, how to demonstrate availability, how to actually make something happen. I don't want to get a rep in my small community of queer people here in my small town for being on the prowl or making people uncomfortable when they're just trying to have a nice time. It's too small a place for that, but if I keep my current patterns, I'm going to end up with a bunch more friends, new friends and no partners and no clue how to convert one into the other. So yeah, I'm excited and I'm scared. I don't want to just go through life playing it safe, but I don't know how to make this happen.
A graph recently rocketed around the internet, how couples meet in the US, and it follows trends from the 1950s up until the 2020s. And the way couples met before the internet came along, through friends, through family, at work, grade school. Oh my God. So not just high school sweethearts somehow making it work. When I say a thing is unlikely, I'm not saying it can't ever happen. And congrats to you and your husband, high school sweethearts. You made it work. You were a couple of the lucky ones, a couple of the exceptions. But when you look at this graph, through friends, through family, work, at a bar, grade school, neighbors, college, all of those trend lines, and roughly 30% of couples historically met through friends, 25% of couples met at work, nearly as many met in a bar, out at a club. And then along comes the internet, 1980. And this line sort of ticks along where people are meeting online. And then in the 2000s, it begins to climb. And after 2010, it's a straight line going straight up. That's how couples meet now. Couples meet online. And some people were circulating this chart and saying, quoting somebody's tweet right here, this is actually a cultural tragedy on par with the loss of a language. A cultural tragedy that more and more people, more and more couples are meeting online. Yeah, people have fewer friends these days. People seem to be more socially isolated. The internet has contributed a great deal to that social isolation. But at least on the work front, I think we need to give the internet some credit, because when you think about all those couples who met at work, you also have to take into consideration all of those people who were asked out at work by someone they weren't interested in going on a date with. All those people who went to work wanting to do their jobs and be left alone and had to deflect unwanted advances. The ones who met at work, where they wound up being couples, turned out that was a wanted advance. But we had to put up with a lot of unwanted advances at work to get those few couples who met at work to meet at work. And it seems to me that that trade-off, workplaces not being somewhere where you hit on people or you feel like you must hit on people because you got to shoot your shot, and knowing you can get online and do it instead, probably made workplaces less stressful, less toxic, less of a hostile work environment. All right. That's a long digression, a long aside. All you got to do is get on the apps to demonstrate availability. Get on Field. Put yourself out there in places where just by walking in the door, like a singles bar back before the internet came along, by entering that space, you are telegraphing to others in that space that they may approach you, that you have entered this space, virtual, in the case of a website like Field or Adult Friend Finder, physical space, meet space in the case of a bar or a club. Get on the apps, put yourself out there, and you will have demonstrated your availability. Gotta say though, I feel your pain. That air of unavailability that you say that you have, that you kind of project this sense of don't approach me, and people feel instantly slotted into the friend zone, quote unquote. I have that same problem. I wouldn't have met my husband if I wasn't hanging out with a friend who forced me to talk to him. And I wouldn't have met my boyfriend if it wasn't for the internet. We had a long conversation before we ever met IRL, face-to-face, face-to-crotch. But that was years later, and just the ease of being able to chat online, that was easier for me to do. I'm bad in person. I'm terrible at picking up on somebody flirting with me. And oh my God, there's this story I like to tell where there was a waiter at a restaurant that I was a regular at for years, and I thought he was adorable and cute. And a decade or more, one husband and one kid later, I ran into him at a friend's house at a birthday party, and he came up and said hi, and we began to talk. And all that time, those months and months and months when he worked at that restaurant, and I was staring at him because I thought he was cute, he thought I was glaring at him. So yeah, I don't have game face. I have anti-game. I have shut the game down face. So I feel your pain, which is why I'm glad that my friend Ginger was at that bar that night when I saw Terry, and Ginger forced me to talk to Terry, which I would not have done if Ginger hadn't forced me to, and which is why I'm grateful that the internet existed, a place where someone like me, and I think we're a lot alike, you and I, caller, could get his flirt on via text and swapping pics instead of face-to-face, where those of us with anti-game face, you and me both, don't tend to excel. So the internet, put it out there. Get on there, make yourself available there, and have fun and good luck. And of course, you and your husband fucked like crazy after you shared this, after he gave you permission to get out there and fuck somebody else. And it wasn't just because you felt trust and security. It was also because your husband was probably turned on by the thought of you and another woman together. And I think you guys should keep that energy in harness and keep fucking the shit out of each other while you go find that pussy. Good luck. This episode is brought to you by Field. It seems like so many of my listeners are talking about and using Field these days, and with good reason. Field lets you have control of your matches, not some creepy algorithm. Field is an app where curious people come to connect. On Field, you have the breathing room to explore your own desires, free from gatekeeping. Here's what that looks like. You decide who and what you like. Sifting through an avalanche of likes is exhausting. On Field, you can filter your likes based on preferences like sexuality, desires, gender, and age, which makes it so much easier to cut straight to the likes from like-minded people. No algorithmic gatekeeping on Field. The only person who can determine what you like is you. To honor the complexity of human desire, Field presents you with all options and leaves you in control of your experience. No pressure to swipe. If you happen to skip someone's profile, you can always ask to go back or undo your dislike at no extra cost. And you can bring your people along. Field's new Constellation features lets you link profiles with your friends and lovers, so new connections will see who you are within your social context. Start a group chat and find your people with your people. There's no limit to how many times you can change your sexuality, desires, interests, or gender identity at Field. In fact, 62% of Field members evolve their sexuality, interests, and desires within their first year on the app. Whether you just moved to a new city and need to find a new community, or you're traveling and looking to meet new people, you can find a new bestie at Field. Download Field on the App Store or Google Play. If you've been wondering about Field because you've heard so much about Field on this show from callers, not just from hosts, I, Dan Savage, recommend that you finally give Field a try yourself.
Hello. I just have a question because I feel like I've heard a lot of stereotypes of gay middle school and high school bullies. There's a lot of gay middle school and high schoolers with bullies, and then later on in life they end up having sex with those high school bullies who are making fun of them for being gay. And I don't know if I just came up with that or if that's like a real thing that I have heard of, but I just need to confirm or deny that and understand where that comes from, if that is something that I have indeed heard before, because my two friends here are gaslighting me into thinking that I perhaps have made that up in my own head, but I'm pretty sure that I have heard that stereotype before.
Gay men, adult gay men, having sex with the guys who bullied them, the homophobic bullies from middle school and high school. That is a thing that happens in porn. I'm sure there's probably one or two isolated cases where that has happened in real life, and it is true, and there is science to back it up, that homophobic attitudes in males who identify as straight correlate very strongly with arousal when viewing gay pornography. Yeah, a lot of kids, a lot of boys who are homophobic bullies in middle school or high school are doing that thing that we see a lot of adult men do, that we talk about adult men doing, externalizing the internal conflict. And they feel implicated or threatened by the openly gay kid at school or the closeted gay kid at school. And they don't want anyone to scrutinize them or where their eyes are drifting in the locker room. And by picking on or beating up the kid that they suspect is gay or the kid that is more easily read as gay, they deflect attention away from, or so they think, their homosexuality or their conflict about their bisexuality or interest in dick. But yeah, that happens in porn. In porn, it's kind of, for many gay men, a revenge fantasy for your bully to get on his knees and beg for your dick. Or for, if you're more of a subby gay man, if DS stuff turns you on and you're into submission, the idea of sexually servicing your bully, the guy who bullied you in middle school or high school, that for some gay men is a huge turn on. And while I don't want to say it's never happened in real life, the place it happens most of the time when it's represented or discussed or talked about is in pornography. We eroticize the things that we fear. Yeah, there may be this erotic connection for some gay men that forms, but it is not a thing that happens often, which is not to say that anti-gay bullies in middle school or high school or up on the altar at evangelical Protestant churches aren't out there sucking dick later in life or right after the fucking sermon. They are. There's a great Psychology Today piece from a few years ago. Homophobic men are aroused by gay male porn. It reads in part, heterosexual men with the most anti-gay attitudes, when asked, reported not being sexually aroused by gay male sex videos, but their penises reported otherwise. Basically, they strapped their dicks into these things that measure arousal, and they showed these men straight porn, lesbian porn, and gay porn, and the guys who reported having the most homophobic attitudes were turned on not exclusively by the gay porn in these studies, but also by the gay porn in these studies. Maybe some of them were gay, maybe some of them were bi, and externalizing that internal conflict and being a bully. The irony here is what I wish would happen, actually, is that homophobic attitudes, there's something gay about it. That if you're a homophobe in middle school or high school, that should be sus. People should look at you and think, hey, what is wrong with you that you have such a problem with the Charlie and Nick or whoever the gay boys are in your school? What's wrong with you? Not what's wrong with them. They're just the gay kids or the gay and the bi kid who are dating each other. But you, Mr. Homophobe, something gay about that. And if that spread through high schools and middle schools, that if you were homophobic, if you expressed homophobic attitudes or beliefs, or even worse, beat up the gay kid, that everybody would think you were gay, rather than everybody thinking you're not gay because you're beating up the gay kid. If everybody thought you were gay because you're beating up the gay kid, maybe that would mean gay kids in middle school and high school would be a little less likely to get beat up.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace, the masters of the internet. They didn't make that copy up, I did. If you're ready to build a website for the first time or upgrade to one that actually works and looks good, these are the folks for you. Start a completely personalized website with the new guided design system, Squarespace Blueprint. You choose from professionally curated layout and styling options to build your own online presence with your own special sauce and optimized for every device. Easily launch your website and get discovered fast with integrated, optimized SEO tools so you show up more often to more people and grow the way you want. And have I introduced you to my friend AI? Kickstarter website written content on any website, product description, or email with Squarespace AI, generating instant, personalized results that know and show your brand identity. Explain what your site is about, choose your tone, and enter what you need to get short or long form text. Squarespace AI makes it easier to go live, stand out, and succeed online. There's so much more to recommend about Squarespace, but unfortunately we have to get back to your sex questions. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/savage and use the offer code SAVAGE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/savage and use the offer code SAVAGE.
Hi, Dan. 50-something-year-old gay guy in Australia here. I was in Europe recently, and I'd mentioned back to a friend in Australia that there are a lot of good-looking men in this country, and he said, send me some pics. So I managed to get a picture of a good-looking waiter, somebody else walking there, just pictures. And at one particular tourist attraction, I was trying to get a picture of a guy working there, and someone behind me, another tourist, saw it and started making a whole lot of noise at me in quite bad English, but I got the gist of it, telling me that, he was stamping his feet and thumping his chest and pointing and waving his arms and telling me that it was wrong and I was rude and I should stop it and to delete the photo, which I did in front of him. And then his wife got involved and she started going off at me, and I think even one of their children was going off at me. And so that was kind of the end of that. But I started thinking, how bad was this thing that I did? The picture of the guy he was fully dressed, obviously. He was working. It was a tourist attraction. He was an adult, clearly. It was middle of the day, surrounded by plenty of people. I had no intention for the picture other than to send it to my friend back in Australia to say, this guy's good looking. Obviously, the people who got upset wouldn't have known that. So my question is, how wrong was I to try and take a picture or two of what I thought were good-looking young men in public places?
Wow, this guy went off on you, his wife went off on you, their kid went off on you. That's a lot of going off on an Australian tourist for doing something that legally you're allowed to do. In the United States, at least the ACLU says When in public spaces where you are lawfully present, you have the right to photograph anything that is in plain view, which would include somebody working at a tourist attraction. In Europe, the laws are a little different, sometimes a little bit more restrictive, sometimes even a little confusing and ambiguous. Taking photos of people in, quote, an obstructive, inappropriate, aggressive, or intimidating way may constitute harassment. Someone trying to photograph you in a sexual way without your consent may be a crime. Obviously, upskirt photography, a crime clearly illegal. But what gets weird about the law in Europe is it states that although you can take pictures in public, no one moving through the world has a reasonable expectation of privacy. Street photography is not illegal in Europe. It is, it seems, against the rules to post someone's photograph to social media without their consent, and their consent can be withdrawn. And I just don't know how that works with a tourist economy where everybody crowding around the Trevi Fountain is taking pictures that have hundreds of other people in them potentially, who may be recognizable in the photos that they're sharing on social media. I just don't know how that could be enforced in a reasonable way. All right, so you were kind of creeping on people. You were taking pictures of hot guys and somebody saw what you were doing on your phone, that you were zooming in on the hot guy who was working there. And on behalf of that hot guy, they took offense because they did. And maybe it was tinged with a little bit of homophobia, or maybe they regard taking that sort of photograph or taking a photograph for that sort of reason because you think somebody is hot, objectifying them in that way, objectifying them with your pixels, is taking a sexually inappropriate photograph. I mean, you were motivated to take these photographs for sexual reasons. You wanted to show these hot guys all over Europe to your friends back in Australia, but they weren't upskirt photographs. You weren't taking pictures of people at a moment when they had a reasonable expectation of privacy. You weren't sneaking around locker rooms with a concealed camera. And yet, you know, I know people who are very good looking, who catch people all the time out of the corner of their eyes, taking photographs of them because they're hot. And it can make somebody feel self-conscious, make them feel uncomfortable. And so maybe the thing that you did wrong was you weren't discreet enough. The person whose photograph you were taking, they didn't know you were taking a photograph, but you were taking a photograph of that person in such a way, like in a line at a tourist attraction where the people behind you could clearly see what you were doing. And so that's where you screwed up. Although I got to say again, you didn't do anything illegal. What you did was lawful, but in the eyes of the people who blew up at you, lawful but awful. And they made you delete the photographs, which you did not have to do, and they had no right to force you to do. The only person who could make you delete that photograph, I think, according to my cursory reading of the contradictory laws, which vary by European country, even though they're all in the EU, only the guy whose photograph that you took could demand that you delete it from your social media where you hadn't posted it. So, yeah, there are going to be some people out there who are very strict about consent and would argue that you can take, I guess, a photograph of somebody standing next to a tourist attraction in Europe, so long as you have no intent to ogle them or send that photograph to someone expressly to be ogled. But the fact that you were taking these photographs of these guys for ogling purposes makes it a consent violation, a minor one, and therefore not okay, even if legally permissible. And yeah, some people can be such, I don't know, so rigid about these things that they're going to hope that they're going to expect me to say into the wood chipper with you for doing this, which I don't believe. Street photography is legal in public. No one has a reasonable expectation of privacy. But I want to emphasize again, I really thought that was well put in that summary of the European laws about street photography that I read, that taking photos in an obstructive, inappropriate, aggressive, or intimidating way may constitute harassment. You were there, you were taking the photos, you know what you were doing. Were you being obstructive? maybe it was inappropriate? Was it a little aggressive or intimidating? Or were the people who blew the fuck up at you busybodies who weren't minding their own fucking business and should go get stuffed?
Hey, Dan, a bit of a kink and trans politics question for you. So I am a trans man and been out for a good decade or so. I have a friend who's in a pretty similar boat, also trans, but identifies as non-binary. We were having a pretty hypothetical conversation about an upcoming kink party. Currently, right now, a little relevant here, I'm single, but I'm gay, and out about and dating, and a lot of the guys I've been dating are cis. And he was talking about this kink party, and I joked about bringing a guy I'm going on a date with to a private party, which no intention of doing. But this brought up a whole conversation. Friend was very uncomfortable having a cis man in the space, which would have been primarily trans, non-binary people at this party. And ruffled my feathers a little bit. Because, me, if I were to say date somebody and we were both involved in the kink community, I'd, of course, want my partner to hypothetically go to events, whether he's cis or trans. And chances are very good that, my next partner will likely be cis. And their vantage point, not a big fan of cis men in general. They argue that there are many, many, many kink spaces that we both go around in that are welcome to cis people. Ergo, there should be events that are reserved exclusively for trans and non-binary folks. On one hand, I do understand the perspective. For one, I'd feel uncomfortable if a cis guy were to show up to a trans support group and even as an ally. But for something like kink and sex, I guess I'd feel a little weird if a partner of mine were excluded just by virtue of, ironically, how he was assigned to birth. So would love your take on this, especially with navigating that divide between reserving safe affinity spaces versus really feeling comfortable exploring kink with a loved one who is part of a more privileged class.
As a cis gay man, if I were dating a trans gay man and there was a party, a kink party, a play party that was exclusively for trans and other non-binary folks, I wouldn't be offended if my trans gay male partner wanted to go party at that party and go play at that party, that I wasn't the vibe, I wasn't wanted at, it wasn't for me. Not every party is for everybody. And I get that. And so why pick a fight with your friend, your non-binary friend, about a hypothetical gay cis male partner that you might have in the future that you might not be able to take to another party like this? If there's another party like this, why lean into that? Why generate conflict in your relationship with your friend by trying to resolve a non-existent conflict about a non-existent partner that you don't have yet, who has not yet been excluded from a party that you aren't going to yet because that party's in the future is not happening? So, yeah, as a matter of principle, you could lay down a marker that says you don't want to go to any parties where the cis gay man that you would like to partner with or imagine you will default into partnering with in the future isn't welcome. Your hypothetical future boyfriend. You can refuse to go to those parties for that reason. If I were your boyfriend in that hypothetical future, though, I would encourage you to go to that party, especially if you're the kind of kinky gay men that have an open relationship, which is most, if not all, kinky gay male couples have that kind of open relationship. And even among kinky gay cis male couples, when it comes to kink parties, different kinds of kink parties cater to different kinds of kink interests. And it might be true for that hypothetical cis gay male kinky couple, another hypothetical, that there would be a kink party that one would want to go to and the other probably wouldn't want to go to, or one would, one has rubber gear and loves rubber and the other partner's into leather and has no rubber gear, so he can't go to the rubber night. Even cis gay male couples may face the same, this party's for me and not for you, What are you going to do? Well, he can stay home and fuck somebody else that night or binge Bridgerton or whatever. And so go to the party. Don't worry about your hypothetical future gay cis male boyfriend that you haven't met yet, and enjoy the party and stop trying to resolve this non-conflict with your friend and just put a pin in it. Like maybe this is something you two can fight about in the future when you stare down a party that your partner, your cis gay male future hypothetical boyfriend, is not invited to. And hopefully your future hypothetical cis male gay boyfriend won't want to go anyway, or will graciously step aside and let you go and acknowledge that, hey, this party is for people who aren't like me. And so I'm going to respect other people's boundaries and other people's freedom of association rights and go do or fuck somebody or something else. I do got to say, though, that we're in a moment where, and maybe this is because of power, the way large groups of cis gay men together can get wild in a way that makes other people feel unsafe. But we are at a moment when it comes to queer parties and sex spaces where you can have a space or an event or a party that excludes gay men or cis gay men, but gay men, cis and otherwise, can't have spaces or parties that exclude anybody else. Because people get really upset when cis gay men do what the trans and non-binary folks who are organizing this party are doing. And I understand why the trans and non-binary folks organizing this party might not want cis gay men at it, because large groups of cis gay men, testosterone-soaked dick monsters, it creates a kind of vibe that can make people who are assigned female at birth or non-binary folks or trans folks feel marginalized or unsafe. And so I get it. But still, since we're having debates about principles here, and on principle you're offended that your future hypothetical gay cis male boyfriend might be excluded, on principle, I just want to point out that we exist in a moment, we live at a time when you can exclude gay men from a party or cis gay men from a party, but cis gay men aren't allowed to do the same. Something to think about. Time for listener feedback. First up, some of the comments left on last week's show in the very lively comment threads at savage.love. Says BGN, for all the talk lately of straight guys who are into cock, it kind of seems like they're just bi. I've never heard of a gay man or straight woman who's into pussy, but not women. Women who are into pussy identify as either lesbians or bi. Are straight men just afraid to label themselves bi? It feels like I love cock, but only if there's no man involved is internalized homophobia or internalized biphobia. In that response, I mentioned trans women who haven't had bottom surgery as potential options for straight-identified men who like dicks but not dudes. Paradise, one of our commenters, left a thoughtful comment about what's potentially problematic about that take, which I will respond to at length in this week's struggle session. Says Mix Zombie Dick, for the guy with a size queen boyfriend, I am a size queen, but prefer my partners to have dicks in the smaller to average range. Taking big dick really turns me on, but I want that to be opt-in rather than standard with my partners because it takes more prep. If I want to go big, my partners can and do use large strap-ons or they fist me. Maybe your guy caller can do the same. And finally, a very important comment from Zico. For the woman dealing with a partner with hygiene problems, that can be a sign of depression, and I wish Dan had mentioned that possibility during the show. I noticed my mother was having trouble with hygiene in the weeks before her suicide, but didn't know then that poor hygiene can be a sign of depression. My suggestion to the listener is answer that question first before doing anything else. And if your partner is dealing with depression, help her as best you can. No cute name adds that neglecting hygiene can also be a sign of dementia. First things first, Zico, my heart goes out to you at the loss of your mother. My advice for that caller, I said that married and partnered people tend to live longer because there's someone there to say, hey, you need to make a doctor's appointment about that thing and get that thing looked at. Or to say, you need to take a shower. While I didn't bring up depression or dementia as possible root causes in my response, I did urge the caller to be direct instead of dropping hints, and being direct as a way of getting to the root of things. But you're right, Zico, I should have brought up depression, and to the original caller, if you're listening, if your partner is displaying other signs of depression, loss of interest in activities they used to enjoy, sullenness, irritability, you might want to raise that subject directly too. For more listener feedback and to try your hand at giving advice yourself, check out Struggle Session every Thursday, where I respond to listener and reader comments and post a letter that isn't going to make it into Savage Love and let you guys give the advice. And now, everyone's favorite part of the show, the part where I shut my big gay mouth, and you, my listeners, get the last word.
Hey, Dan, calling in regards to your call this week about the woman whose wife had a stinky butt and wasn't brushing her teeth very much. I'm surprised you didn't mention the bidet. It seems like ever since I got one, I can't imagine that I never had one. Get your lady a bidet.
Hey, Dan, this is a response about the man who killed his partner's dog. That kind of blew my mind to think that this man kind of has the audacity to be focusing on this and not what he really should be focusing on. But more importantly, this woman really needs to take a look and see at who she's partnered with, because if she cannot even trust this man to care for her dog, what does she see in the future with them? Like, that's something that she really needs to think about. And if I were her, I would have cut it off as soon as my dog died.
Hey, Dan, this is in response to the two callers who wanted to surprise their male partner in a polyamorous relationship. If he likes to watch them, then why don't they make a sex tape for him? They could, do this in a couple different ways. They could record it, send it to him a day beforehand, tease him, oh, this is what you're going to see tomorrow. They could send it to him, minutes beforehand, and then have him walk in right after he watches it all aroused. Or they could have him wait on the couch, go record it in the next room, come back, watch it together. I think there's a couple different ways they could play around with it, but if he likes to watch them, why don't they give him an opportunity to watch them whenever he wants?
And we're going to leave it there. We've got 3 ways for you to get us your questions and comments for future shows. You can record and upload your question directly onto our website at savage.love/askdan, or you can make a voice memo on your own phone and email it to us at q@savage.love, or you can call our landline and leave us a message at 206-302-2064. Hump 2024 Part 2 plays in theaters this weekend in New Orleans, Vancouver, and Palm Springs. There's nothing better than an evening of sexy, funny, kinky short films in a theater packed with sexy, funny, kinky film lovers to distract you for 90 minutes at least from the news. And since no phones are allowed at Hump, that means you can't doom scroll during a Hump screening. For tickets to a Hump screening near you or to get a streaming pass to watch Hump at home with your friends, go to humpfilmfest.com. And while you're there, click on Submit a Film to find out everything you need to know about getting your dirty little movie into the best dirty little film festival in the world. That's Hump. Magnum subs, watch for that new episode of Sex and Politics, which will pop into your Lovecast feeds on Thursday. Follow me on Instagram and Threads at Dan Savage. Follow me at Blue Sky at Dan Savage. Follow Cody Daigle-Orians on Instagram and Threads at AceDadAdvice. Check out their Substack at acedadadvice.substack.com and their website, acedadadvice.com. Cody's new book, The Ace and Arrow Relationship Guide, is out now. The Savage Lovecast is produced every week by Nancy Artunian and me and the tech-savvy at-risk youth. We'll all be back at you next week with another installment of the Savage Lovecast. Thank you, as ever, for downloading.